Greetings. My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition is a special as we're joined by Dr.Segun Shabaka. He is the chairman of NACO, the National Association of Kawaida Organizations, as well as the chairman of the International African Arts Festival in Brooklyn. Welcome to Cultural Caravan.
Thank you, Sante, for having me.
All right, thank you. Now, there has been a lot of talk about culturally relevant education. And basically, culturally relevant education is defined as education that empowers students to maintain their cultural identity, integrity, while succeeding academically. In alignment with that, I know that you were associated with a very distinguished institution that was based on the principles of grounding children in their cultural identity, known as the Uhuru Sasa Shule. Could you basically tell us what the organization, just some history about it for those who are not familiar?
Yes, the Uhuru Sasa School was part of the umbrella formations under the East Cultural and Educational Center, which grew out of the struggle for community control in the 1960s, late 1960s, under the leadership of people like G. Tuwezi, Herman Ferguson, Ilaua Ferguson, and Al Van. And so the students, African American Students Association, organized by the African American Teachers Association, had some issues with the public schools after they protested, and many of them were forced out, kicked out. And so Uhuru Sasa was actually started as a high school to help the young brothers and sisters from that movement to get their education. And it grew into, from a high school to elementary and junior high school. And at one point in its development, we had over 500 students. And our focus was to fuse academic rigor or academic excellence with cultural and historical awareness and understanding. And so the students had a wide variety of academic courses, arts courses, martial arts, visual arts, music, and we have produced, and it shows what is possible when we take control as aware, conscious people of African descent of our children's education. And I may add that this was not just Uhuru Sasa. There was a national organization that these independent schools that grew out of similar situations around the country produce similar like educational models, and they were organized into a unit, and it was called CB, the Council of Independent Black Institutions. It's still in existence today, although a lot of the schools are not here anymore. So this model is an example of what's possible. And there are some people now beginning to do some research on the students that we produce, okay? Because we produce doctors, lawyers, engineers, but really a lot of just good, decent people. Gave them values. And the value system of Uhuru Sasa, I must say, and CB was the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles. And it brought in people from all walks of life because, as we say in Kawaida, we must have unity without uniformity, unity and diversity. We must have operational unity. And so our school was composed of a total Pan-African population. And when I say that, I mean we had Muslims, Israelites, traditionalists, atheists, continental African, Caribbean Africans, Africans from all over the world. They were part of the student population, parent population, staff, and so we excelled in many ways. okay? In urban environment, where, of course, they don't use that term too much anymore because we've been gentrified, or I should say genocide. So we had people of very meager income, but they only paid maybe in the beginning $10 a month. Okay, and of course that reflected on us as teachers because we didn't have any money. You know, we were very, we made a tremendous sacrifice. But of all the institutions we had at the East, we said that the school was the most important because we had to instill these values and this education in our children, and so we made that sacrifice.
So you said a lot of things, and I thank you for sharing that. You talked about the fact that the institution, it was geared towards developing a consciousness of our culture. In addition to that, how the brothers and sisters who came out, and can you tell us the year, when was the East founded? What year did it start?
Yes, 1969.
And to what date? To when?
Until mid 80s, 87, 86, 87.
So many of these young people, all of them basically are adults now. You know, they have their own family.
Grandparents.
And so you raised generations of young people that are now adults who are like that. And certainly the fact that you can say that what came out of an understanding of cultural heritage really meant that these young people went forth into the world with an understanding of their heritage, their culture, and basically gave back. One of the things that, as you know, today in our school system, there's moves afoot. A lot of school systems, or particularly New York school systems, are adopting My Brother's Keeper, which was an initiative under the Obama administration to really focus in on boys of color, young men of color. And certainly in terms of looking at how they can stop the cycle of prison to school to prison pipeline, as well as to provide some level of cultural understanding. Tell us about these programs that you've seen in relationship to the programs that you and G2 were a part of.
Well, I can't say that I've seen them. I've heard about them. And in fact, I really can't speak much on them because I don't know where they are in operation. I've been out of education for almost 10 years. So, but I can say that we have to ask a few questions as people in the community that have been in the community all our lives. When people come in like carpetbaggers, that they're going to come and save us. So I'm saying that we said that education must give identity, purpose, and direction to our children. And these programs are good, but we have to ask another question, which is, what role do black people play? What does it do for black people? What does it do to black people? And how do black people effectively participate in these programs? You see, so we a colonized community for the most part. We're still colonized. Next year will be, what, 2019, 400 years since we've been in this country. And we still treated as second-class citizens. So how do we, as African people, come together? We are our own saviors. We are our own liberators. And we must understand that. And this is a consciousness I'm not sure the government wants us to have. You understand? So the question is self-determination, really, that we must decide what's best for us, and we must pursue those and demand adequate support from the government and the corporate community and the leadership in our community.
Well, you raised a very interesting and important question about we have to, as parents, as community people, be aware of the programs that come in. We have to be involved in the programs coming into our community. And we have to take some ownership because, as you said, appropriately, sometimes we just step back and say, okay, somebody else is going to take care of it. And then we don't know what is being offered to our children in the quote unquote name of cultural understanding. So you're definitely right. And I think that one of the things when I think about the role of the engagement of parents, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the parents of the Uhuru Sasa were very instrumental in development of the African Street Festival.
Yes.
That now is the International African Arts Festival. So tell us about that connection.
Yes, the parents were a key component of the institution. And in fact, any educational institution that's doing its job, it has a strong parent body. You're involving the parents. And so the parents were a major component to the festival. They're the ones that started Brother John Branch, Brother MZ Moyo. They're the ones that played a key role in the school closing program that grew into the African Street Carnival, then the African Street Festival, and now it's the International African Arts Festival 40 years later. So yes, the parents are very, very important. And again, the parents are not as involved in the education process in our community as other communities. In fact, if you look at some of these other communities, people moving into these communities, and even the gentrifiers coming into our community, one of the first things they check are the schools. They check the quality of the school. And you will notice all of these charter schools coming up, they're not running a lot by our community. And they're gonna have alternative options to serve this new gentrified population, the genociders.
Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting. So you're right that there is some need. Again, parent engagement is so critical to our survival in terms of understanding parents as partners. And one of the things, even as relates to some of the new legislation, as many people know that No Child Left Behind was sunset in 2015, and now the Every Student Succeed Act is the new law of the land under former President Obama, and it's being implemented. States had the option to select how they would implement Every Student Succeed Act, and New York State has passed their plan, has approved by the feds, and now part of that component is cultural literacy, ensuring that children get, in addition to that, parent engagement, and that parents are fully engaged as partners. So we hope that our parents understand that there is a need and that actually schools are expected to engage you as partners as we go forward. But getting back to the whole,
let me say, please, this issue of culture is very important. It's not like something abstract. It is a human right. Culture is who we are. Culture is the totality of thought and practice of a people. So it's everything we do and everything we think is culture. And so it's a human right. It's not some privilege to be bestowed on us. Each child should come up with a cultural and historical identity and understanding, self-understanding. And we can say, based on history, that our population, particularly African Americans, one of the biggest crises facing us is this identity problem. Why do we have all these identities? Because we've been sacrificed by this country to destroy who we were so that they can remove our mind, as Malcolm said, take our mind, our brain out of Africa and put Europe's brain in our head. And that's how we've been functioning. And so many of us go through, you've heard me say it before, 12, 16, 20, maybe 24 years of education and never have a course in our own history. That's a crime. That's a crime. So we have to understand this. And you even have some Negroes that will say, what do you need that for? What do you need that black studies for? So I could get my mind back.
Now, again, you raised an excellent point again about the need for us to reclaim our mind mentally, spiritually, physically, and particularly the importance of our history as a means to liberate us and to keep us in a state of mind of understanding. And as people talk about, and we look about the fact, and you know, it's interesting, you know, a lot of times we've used the term 400 years of slave or 400, but the fact is, as stated, next year, 2019, will be 400 years since our sojourn in America as enslaved people, if you're going to talk about 1619.
That's not counting the rest of the hemisphere.
Not counting
You have to
that.
go back to the 1400s.
Exactly. But if people, you
And
know,
that's
want
not
to,
counting the free Africans as Van Sertima taught us.
Absolutely. But basically just
I'm
looking
sorry.
at that, no, that's fine, as the fact that we asking ourselves, where are we? You know, how far have we gone? You know, sometimes we have to look at that in terms of what do we need to ensure freedom? Is freedom, we know physically we are free, but mentally, psychologically, what are we doing? Are we acting as free people? Okay, and that's one question.
Let me interject about freedom. See, because we're not physically free. When you look at African people, black people in this country, and don't even discuss the devastating state of Native Americans, and we ask, what is freedom? There's two types of freedom we say in Coweta. One is freedom from want, toil, and domination. Are we free from that? Want, toil, and domination. We still dominated. We still toiling. We got black people living double and triple lives just to survive. Okay? And so that's freedom from. We're not free from that. And then there's freedom too. Freedom to have the resources to fully realize ourselves individually and collectively as human beings. We're surely not free to do that. Okay? You still can't go some places in this country. You still can't walk and you have to get special training as a young black male, now as a female, how to approach the police. That's not freedom. You see? So we still, as Malcolm said, treated as second-class citizens, and even King understood that there was the three evils of poverty, militarism, and racism. Those are freedoms that we have to bear the brunt of.
So in line with that, when we think about and we talk about, and let's talk to that parent on the other side of the tube, or let's talk to that teacher and the other side of the tube who's actually saying, you know, I want to make sure that my children, my students, or my child has an understanding of him or herself as a human being, as an African person of African ancestry. And how do I ensure, what type of steps, what do I have to do in terms of making my home, making my classroom, an environment where I can develop some sense of cultural pride and dignity?
Okay, that's a good question. I think first the teacher needs to study the history of the population that it's teaching, not just African population, because I have different students in my class. I taught history for many, many years of my 40 years in education. I taught history. And so I study these different cultures from their perspective. So in African people, we talk about from an Afrocentric perspective in which you are dealing with the human and cultural image and interests of African people, not from Jefferson's perspective, you see, not from Washington. So you have to study these people from their history and cultural perspective, their lens. So that's primary. And then you begin to, like you said, put images and talk about it in your classroom. I mean, I don't want to get into, because I don't want to say I can speak generally, but even in various subjects, there's representation of African people, because we're the mothers and fathers of humanity as well as human civilization. So the major sciences and social organization, political organization, black people have literature in this that humanity can learn from. And if you read Diop, that's what Civilization of Barbarism is about. He's trying to tell us we have to get a new way of looking at this world.
So in terms of a parent now who wants to ensure, instill, or create an environment that's culturally rich, what are some of these suggestions?
Again, to read their own history, culture. I used to have my students do something very interesting. My high school students. I had my students do research papers because I'd ask them, you know, you want to go to college? Everybody wants to go to college. They want to go to college for be a doctor, a lawyer. I said, how long you got to go study for? You got to study for. You got to be in school for like 12 years, maybe after you graduate. You got to love school. You know, so one of the things I would do with my students, they would have to do research papers, even though it wasn't a requirement. They wanted to go to college. I wanted to get them ready for research paper. But the first paper they had to do was to research their family's history. And they come up with, oh, my parents live in Africa. They live in the Caribbean. I don't care. There's technology. You can talk to them. Make the move. I want this paper. And that was something that bonded them with their parents, their grandparents, you know. So that's how you start. Then you put images up of their history around the house. There's something, I know we're almost out of time, so let me say this. Something that we need to do, I want some people to study is all this talk about the white doll and black doll. Uhuru Sasa students, I know my girls wouldn't dare pick. I know what they would pick, which doll they would pick, because they had the grounding for it. So they making us look pathological and sick because they asking the wrong people the wrong questions. So we have to do this research. If your child is picking those dolls, it's because you haven't taught them the right way, and you need to impose on the system the knowledge, the self-knowledge for your children's well-being.
And so you've raised some excellent points in terms of, one thing, the parent as being the first teacher, and the need for the parent to be educated themselves and to be able to, first of all, surround the environment. I mean, I know that we can't see this beautiful environment here at CMOTAP, but you could see just by the back, the beautiful wall, really history right there, reaffirming our culture, reaffirming our history. So really making your home, and it's similar to something the great Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said about reaffirming ourselves in terms of that. And yes.
Let me say this because you use a term, and I know you didn't mean it, but let me make sure it's clear. You said the parent needs to educate themselves. Yes, they should get formal education, but they could self-educate themselves. My parents had 3rd and 6th grade education, but they produced 8 children with degrees. Okay? We grew up in the projects, like a lot of kids. I was there in my family's house till I was in my 20s, okay? But they taught us values. I worked, I went to school, I volunteered. So the question is not the parents' education, it's the parents' value, how they value education. Because you know, part of the experience of the Holocaust of enslavement was you weren't supposed to have an education. And even today, they making it difficult for us to learn as African people in this country. So we have to be our own antagonistic force for what's right. And we have to be what we call rational fanatics about our freedom.
Well, I can say, my brother, you've said it all, and you know, there's so much to say, and certainly in terms of just giving us food for thought in terms of what we need to do to self-educate so that we can liberate our minds and liberate the minds of our children. Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much
you.
for joining us. And
My
we
pleasure.
look forward
I'm
to
honored.
other opportunities. And let me please share with us information. I know at this broadcast some of them, but just give how they can contact you about some of the wonderful programs that you offer.
Well, you can contact me at the International African Arts Festival, 718-638-6700, or info@iaafestival.org.
Yes. Let me just say on behalf of Cultural Caravan, we sincerely thank you so much, dear brother, for being with us and really sharing some important information about cultural literacy, cultural awareness, and the need for us to educate ourselves and then educate our families. So on that note, I want to say thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being part of
Thank
this.
you.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and I continue to encourage you to tune in, to write, and to tell a friend. And please visit our website at www.ccptv.org and our YouTube channel, which just put ccptv.org, and you can see all of some of the past broadcasts of Cultural Caravan TV. So again, thank you for joining us.